open house and wrote up an offer on another property with another agent, not with the agent holding the open house. I don't know if they didn't really matter. It didn't fly.
Right.
But that agent also then showed that prospective buyer another listing from their office, and that buyer liked it. Okay, but after been involved with this other agent now for a little bit, did not like this other agent's competency level.
Right.
You know, this agent then, after seeing the other property that this agent did show, called me up and said, "Steve, I want you to write up I like this property. This agent showed them to me, but I don't want to work with this agent. I want to work with you."
They have to fire him.
Okay, he did not have a buyer's representation agreement, okay, either at that point.
Okay.
I wrote up the offer, and so I wrote up the offer and the whole bit. This agent then made a claim, and I won on the basis of you know, the buyer said, "Hey, I only wanted you to represent me on that one property, you know, from the open house," and it didn't work.
Well, and just to add to that, Stephen, thank you so much for sharing. You're 100% correct on that. You know, if the buyer is very specific, you know, you want to make sure that the agent, and this is where your follow-up is very crucial, asking a lot of questions, right? Because that will help you navigate if you're ever in a procuring cost claim. Is that, were you specific that it was only that property that you wanted the agent to show you? Do you have any emails, any text messages, any voice messages that we can use as a arm of defense to you know, rebut this from, you know, going in a different direction? And they may say, "Yeah, you know what, I was very specific. Here's a screenshot of text messages that I was only specific that you can represent me just on this one particular property," and then you're safe, you know, because now that buyer can go and work with other agents. So very good point there. All right, so the procuring cost dispute occurs when more than one agent asserts that they're entitled to the buyer side commission. Again, that's why there's these claims, you know, because maybe you are in the right. Maybe you did have a buyer representation agreement. Maybe you submitted an offer and that offer was declined, but the buyer, your client, was influenced by the listing agent. Say, "Look, take Simon out of the equation, work with me, and I'll make sure to get your offer accepted." And now that buyer goes in a different direction, says, "I don't want to work with you, Simon." But now we find out that the buyer ended up buying that property. Now we're entitled to go after, you know, some compensation. Yes, ma'am.
I forgot, but that's okay. I was thinking about, as you were talking about that I'll ask you when I think of it. So
Okay.
it's the over 60 brain, just kind of.
It's not, it's 30s and 40s too.
Yeah,
so
I know. I started when I was 40. But yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about
the
the,
box. Get that up.
oh, thanks. Let's talk about the burden of proof. Thank you, Steve. All right. Let's talk about the burden of proof, right? The broker who files the arbitration complaint carries the burden of proof, right? Whoever files the complaint has the avenue that has to prove why they're entitled to a commission. Why he or she is the procuring costs and therefore is entitled to receive the commission. Generally, the broker filing the complaint is the one who does not have the commission. So in most situations, the broker who does not have the commission in pocket will have to prove that he or she is entitled to the commission, which is very, very, very true, right? No one is going to just file a complaint just to file. There has to be a reason why this individual is challenging the commission. Now, there's many avenues in how you can see this, right? Because if you do have a buyer representation agreement in place, right? Well, it defines on the BRE that typically the buyer is the one paying you a commission if the listing or the seller is not compensating you, then yes, the buyer will be responsible in paying you a commission. But there is language on the buyer representation agreement on page 2, upper paragraph, that says that if anyone else pays you a commission, then that credits the buyer from paying you a commission. Okay, so that's, if you know how to explain that to the consumer, then they don't feel so fearful that, am I going to pay you a commission on top of, you know, the down payment and the closing costs? If you know how to explain it to them, it's easier for them to sign it. The problem where a lot of agents is they don't know how to explain the contract. And this is why you get resistance from the buyer. I don't want to sign that. Okay, does the buyer have to sign any of the documents you provide them? The answer is no. We can ask, and there's protection based on that, but at the end of the day, the buyer does not have to sign, or the seller have to sign any of the forms we provide. Any questions regarding burden of proof? A compilation of facts that are considered by an arbitration panel to determine which broker is entitled to the commission, right? Compiled in a chart and based on factors gathered by many sources that have been used by many arbitration panelists. Chart is not to be used as a numerical system to give points to one side or another. In given circumstances, some factors will not be present, others should be given more weight. It is the guide to raise and consider relevant issues, okay? You see the scale, right? Let me raise it up right here, okay? What do you think this is in here? And what do you think it's tilting? Okay. The reason the scale is there is the scale of weight. And the scale of weight is who has more weight on this case, who has more evidence, who has a better, not necessarily process, but, you know, evidence of proof, documentations, presentations, meeting with the clients, you know, phone, emails, text messages. All this is all information that you need in order to present your case. And this is the reason, on top of not just showing a property, okay, because just showing property doesn't entitle you to a commission. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Arbitrator, I showed the buyer, Allie, you know, 25 homes, okay? And then Jim meets with the client, submits an offer, and their offer gets accepted. Just because you show 25 to the client, and then Jim shows it once to the same client, he has the better case. Even though your time is valuable, and you did show 25 homes, and you would think by the 25th time, right? You think you have a relationship with this buyer. Yeah. And then takes Jim to come in here, sweep your clients, and submits an offer, and the offer gets accepted. And you spend 2 months with the buyer. But Jim meets with them, passes out his business cards, want to work with Jim, and his offer gets accepted. Then it comes to the paperwork, the contract, okay? The paperwork is very, very relevant as well, okay? Because let's just say that you, Allie, have an agency disclosure, right? The AD form, but you never got the buyer to sign the buyer representation agreement, okay? But maybe Jim did have the ability to convince the buyer to sign the buyer representation agreement, okay? You have an agency which defines the responsibility of the buyer's agent, the listing agent, and the buyer and seller's responsibility. That's what it defines on the AD form. But the buyer representation agreement goes a little deeper of expiration dates. How much time are you going to be spending with the client? What is the price range? What area are you looking at? It goes really defined, but it also has pieces from the AD form that is in contribute to the buyer representation agreement. So if you were to look at the scale weight, I believe, in my personal opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim has a better position to earn that commission. Just say, does that make sense? All right, so the categories of factors: connections to the transaction, the relationship of both the broker to the buyer in a particular transaction, buyer's choice. Okay, so these are elements of the connection and who would win on a procuring cost claim. The connection of the transaction, buyer's choice. Okay, the buyer has a say-so too. Okay, the doggy has a say-so. Okay, the dog says, look, I don't want to work with you, Allie. I want to work with Jim. Or the dog goes to Jim. There's probably a reason for that. And they'll look at that and consider that as well. Why the buyer left the original broker, and if the reason was so justified as to defeat the original broker's procuring cost claim. Interesting stuff, right?
Well, that was really the reason why I won.
Yes,
is
sir.
the buyer did not feel confident that the other agent who they wrote that offer that didn't get accepted, that they did not want to be represented now by this agent on another offer to be written up, in which they were very impressed with when they spoke to me.
Sure.
Wow, this guy knows his stuff. I want him to write up the offer, especially after finding the end result on the offer they wrote.
100%.
Fair enough.
100%.
Yeah.
And I'm not an arbitrator, but I can see right through it, that you do have, the evidence in place. And I think you have a very legitimate and solid position, in my opinion. Absolutely. Broker conduct. The conduct of the second broker. Could the closing broker have prevented the problem that the closing broker engaged in an inappropriate conduct that contribute to the breakup, right? The breakup of the first relationship and the chain of events that started by the intro broker. They look at all those factors. What's the second broker? Meaning, if Allie was working with Jim, Jim comes to my open house and I say, Jim, hey, Jim, if you let me represent you in submitting an offer, most likely 99% chance that your offer will be considered. If you work with Allie, you're just going to submit, we're probably going to say in a counter offer, but there may not be a chance that you'll get your offer. Now, that's very direct, right? That's an ethics issue right there. And if Allie gets wind of all this, then she has a compelling position to file a complaint against me, because I've been an influencer on making you decide what direction to go. Does that make sense? Okay. Contractual and other miscellaneous issues that are relevant to the ultimate decision. There's many things that can lead up to that, and it could be some of the smallest stuff, like who registered the lockbox, right? You know that when you open a Supra, that it gets registered by the listing agent. You'll know who the agent is, the name of the agent, their phone number, the time and date that you went and showed this property. So if someone is trying to challenge you saying, well, it was at the open house, but you went a second time to go show your client because they wanted to get a second view of it in a more intimate position where there was not other people there, and you go there, open it up on your Supra, you want to make sure that the listing agent gives you a copy, and you can subpoena that as part of the process, to give you access to their history, because that is a compelling position that says, look, I was also the one that contributed to showing the property. I went on the following day, on Wednesday, it was at 11:15. Here's the history that shows my ID, because it'll show your ID, your name, as you entering that lockbox or that home. Okay, so there's a lot of factors, the connection of the transaction, the choice of the buyer, the broker's conduct, and other factors such as contracts and miscellaneous as well. Okay, here's some examples. Who first introduced the buyer to the property? How much time lapsed between the first broker showing the property and the second broker writing the offer? Who ultimately wrote the offer that got accepted and performed services during escrow? Why did buyer choose to leave the first broker? Was there a buyer representation agreement in place? Okay. I got to stress, folks, the importance of those buyer representation agreements. And I know a lot of real estate agents do not use them, but here's a proven factor that will either make it or break it, meaning you'll get paid a commission or may not get paid a commission. You know and understand how to present these agreements. And then knowing the reason why this buyer, and the buyer may say, look, and it's a very candid conversation. Are you happy working with your current agent? It's a legitimate question. And then that's when the buyer spills the beans, and really opens up. Oh, remember, document that, write it in your mind, because if the buyer does end up working with you, okay, because the buyer has the choice to work with you. Okay, there's consequences, right? But if the buyer wants to work with you, are you going to say no to it? No. The agreement is between the other agent. You were not really a contributor factor that influenced them to choose you. Maybe it was just your professionalism. You knew the process. They felt comfortable. They trust you, and they want to work with you. Now, what else can you do if that does happen? Okay, there's many stuff that you can do. Work with the other agents, split or give them a referral, to make it a win-win. And I've seen that happen where, look, the client wants to work. I don't really care of the dynamics of what happened, but in good faith, I'm willing to pay you a referral. And that referral can be 20, 25% or whatever you agree to. And that agent may be happy. Now I'm going to get something better than nothing because the buyer doesn't want to work with me anyways. I'm going to lose a commission. But it's your professionalism, right, that says, you know what, I'm going to do the right thing. And I'm still going to compensate that agent, because I want to build that relationship with that agent as well. Make sense? Tips to avoid. Always ask a prospect buyer whether he or she is working with another broker, okay? Common sense, right? If yes, ask whether the buyer has signed an exclusive representation agreement. There you go. There's the follow-up, Steve, okay? It's okay to ask, and then your gut feeling will tell you, okay, you know what? I see some resistance with the buyer, then that's when you stop. Let them go. Well, here's the flyer. Please make yourself at home. If you have any questions, please let me know. Question.
Yeah, sometimes they say, oh yeah, I'm working with a real estate agent, and they just walking out. But what we do is we ask them, well, if you're thinking of submitting an offer in this property, we want to know your name and your listing page. I mean, your agent, so we could know that you actually came and looked at the property. And also that's good to know too. So
Sure.
There's no blind offers right now.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to ask
And we get that.
direct questions.
Yeah, they write their name and their agent's name, which is good.
Because what if this buyer has been bouncing from agent to agent to agent? Do you really want to work with this particular buyer? Maybe not, because there's no certainty that you give them a bad look or you say the wrong thing, they'll leave, work with someone else, and you just spend time with this buyer and not got anything out of it as well. So, that's why it's very important to ask a lot of questions. If you discover your client has been working with another broker on the same transaction, ask why the client left the first broker and if appropriate, make immediate contact with the broker and try to resolve it, okay? Look, you know, being proactive is the cure to all problems, right? It's being proactive and engage in that conversation. Hey, I just want to give you a heads up, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, reach out to me, you know, and as a courtesy, I want to make this a win-win. You know, they want to work with me. They apparently said to me, and, you know, be truthful about it. They say, you know, there's been some challenges in working with your firm and yourself. How can we make it a win? Because they don't want to work with you. They want to work with me. What if we, you know, do a referral? You know? I'd rather say, yeah, you know what, good luck. If you can work with that client, I don't have to do anything, or I'm not going to get a commission. I'd rather get something than better than nothing, right? Don't risk working through a difficult escrow, close the transaction, and then ultimately not get paid a commission. Use the buyer representation agreement with or without compensation provision. Okay, the relationship and the prompt discovery of other broker relationships. If a buyer commission is included, it will also create an incentive for the buyer to come to you and terminate the contract prior to going to another broker. Yeah, that's the whole purpose. Now, there's three different buyer representation agreement. There's the BRE, the BRNE, and then the BRNNE, I think. And one is the exclusive buyer representation agreement. The other one is a agency buyer representation agreement. And the other one is where there's no compensation buyer representation agreement, basically stating that you are not charging the buyer for a commission. It's just no commission. It's just, I have an exclusive agreement with this buyer. I have 3 months to work with this buyer. And these are the locations or the counties that I'm working with, and here's the price range. And again, that can also fish them to hook them back to you if you do have an exclusive agreement, because then they would have to be paying a commission. Accommodate the clients to open houses, right? You know, I mean, that's the safe haven, right? If you can be with your clients at all open houses, even better, because now you're protecting your clients. If you cannot give a client your card and instruct them to tell other agents that they're already working with you and present them your business card. Stay in close contact with your clients and be responsive during the transaction. If you conduct an open house, keep a registry of all prospecting buyers, including a note of whether they were a broker with their buyer. Keep a record that the agent sitting on the open house asked the buyer if they were working with an agent. For listings where the property is being shown by brokers when you are not present, leave a sign-in sheet with buyer's name, broker's name, similar to those at a new home development, include date, time in the registry. That creates what's called a record of who was shown the property within which brokerage or broker. In additional resources, the procuring cost guidelines, that's right straight from the California Association of Realtors. They also have a live webinar regarding, you know, procuring costs. Now that was back in 2019, but you can actually go back and see the recording of this live webinar. Okay. All right. Any questions? Right on time, 3 o'clock. That never happens.
Thank you.
All right, team. Well, that concludes our lecture today. If you have any other questions, please email me, text me, or call me. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Next week, Steve Gottlieb will be handling our class, so we're looking forward to Steve teaching and hosting that one. So thank you, guys.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.